Sending peace and love to everybody out there today. We welcome you to this space. This is a space of hope and healing. We're here every Sunday, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, sharing love, sharing light, sharing hope, sharing healing, literally uh, and metaphorically. And ultimately, our goal here is to really help to make a difference in this world, bringing more love and light to the experience of human beings living on planet Earth. We're working to create a more harmonious and unified global community to the glory of God. And we also want for you to be able to, as individuals, to be able to experience something that actually allows you to be able to ultimately within your own experience, dwell in a sustainable state of supreme satisfaction. I'm Royce Fletcher Thomason, developed a methodology of healing by the grace of God that I refer to as transcending the matrix. And we are here um, sharing the beauty of the blessing of healing that manifests as physical healing, is emotional, spiritual healing, and any form of healing, really, that there is to be had. Curly Conscious King, greetings to you, brother. Good to have you in the space today. Much love, light, and many blessings to you. Good to see you as always. Good to have you here. And good to have you as a fellow sojourner on this journey and fellow person who's looking to make a positive, life affirming difference, not only in your world, but in the greater world as it relates to healing, transformation, uh, being a vessel of love and of light, of pure love and divine light. So greetings to you and to everybody here. I always love to know who's present. So if you uh, would be open to just sharing a brief hello or something of that nature, I'm always very thankful for that. Also, encourage you to subscribe to the Matrix Healing on YouTube page. We're broadcasting typically weekly. It's very seldom that we miss a week. Occasionally, we may do it more than once during the week, but typically we're here every Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern. And thank you, thank you, Curly Conscious King. Um, but subscribe and if you would hit the notification bell so that you know when we're actually going live. We share content weekly that we believe will be a blessing to you and could be certainly a blessing to people that you know. There are times where we have people come on who are in pain or who are experiencing different health challenges and situations, and we welcome the opportunity to be able to offer healing live on the spot, where we've had people who've become free of pain during the live broadcast. So if you know anybody who is in need of any healing, whether it's physical healing, and listen, it doesn't matter to me if a person's got a tumor that the doctors say is inoperable, or there's a broken bone, or there's herniated disc or something going on in the physical. That is basically irrelevant to me. I've seen all of that stuff transform, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me, uh, and apparently it doesn't matter just in general. That I'm in Florida broadcasting right now from Florida, and you are wherever it is that you are in the world. This stuff just works. It does. Like when I take my phone and send somebody a text message, they get it like that. It doesn't matter that there are no wires physically connected or anything. But in a similar way, the healing kind of works like that. And it just does. It could maybe be a little bit difficult to wrap your mind around why that's possible, how that's possible. Sometimes I get into that in the broadcast. That's not what the focal point for today is. Our focal point for today is, and sometimes we'll share different messages, ideas, concepts, and such. Sometimes we'll focus exclusively on the healing. Our kind of theme for today's hope and healing session is why people hate and what could be done about it, right? And that's really the important part. What can be done about it? What can be done about it? And we'll get into that. We'll get into some of that. And this is really coming in the context of by now, many of you are probably aware that there was a massacre that took place in Buffalo, New York. Um, well, it would have been 8 days ago now. It was last Saturday, May 14th, and today is Sunday, May 22nd. And so it was just a little bit over a week ago that this took place. I didn't use it as my topic last week. But I mean, for those of you who don't know, it was essentially a situation where somebody put on armor and brought weaponry with intent to kill a mass number of people, and that is what happened. Greetings and many blessings to you, Reverend Shirley Price Lawson. Maybe we can have a conversation today. I know that but please charge it to my head and not to my heart. Um, but I'm not going to give a whole rundown of exactly what the whole scenario was, but basically, a person did a Google search on, you know, trying to find where the greatest, where there would be a large population of Black folks. And he drove a considerable distance. Um, with essentially with artillery and with the intent to kill people, and he streamed it on on a streaming service called Twitch, uh, and it was he had written this long manifesto of what he was going to do and everything. And apparently, there are people who've done similar things where it's almost like a manual that's created, and they're adding to it of how to uh, carry out essentially hate crimes. But what our essential topic is, that's what kind of inspired, motivated our topic for today. Why people hate? Why do people hate? Why do people hate? Ah, it's something that it's hard for me to wrap my mind around because I just come from a different place. But I do understand why people hate. And we're going to get into some solution stuff because, it's not just about focusing on what the problems are. Uh, I'm laying out the problem so we can actually get to solution. Okay. It is a reality that in the United States, where I'm broadcasting from, there has certainly been uh, a history of a lot of situations where there is uh, hate that is evidenced in forms of bigotry and violence, and not just in this country. In many points in human history, we've seen this. We've seen it in the context of people who are at war against each other based on religious systems or belief systems. We've seen it based on ethnicity. We've seen it based on gender, based on sexual orientation, a lot of different things, a lot of different things. And you can't convince me that hate is the perfect will of God. I believe that God is love, and they that dwell in love dwell in God. Um, while I have the blessing of working with uh, being someone who is referred to as a spiritual teacher by people of virtually every major religion, and many forms of indigenous spiritual practices. I am a minister, and I own that unashamedly. And and Scripture says that God is love, and they that dwell in love dwell in God. Jesus the Christ said, "How will you know that you're my disciple? Because you love each other." You know, and um, while love is certainly not a uniquely Christian concept, that is my own background, and I own that. And regardless of where it is that you're coming from, I believe that you can find value in the significance and the power and the value of love, right? But let's get into this thing about why why do people hate? What is the root of why people hate? And that's what I'm always dealing with, is the root. That's what I'm always looking at, is what is the root cause that we're dealing with. When a person has pain in their back, or a person has um, gout, or a person has a high blood pressure, whatever the situation is, I'm always looking at what's the root cause of it. Because from the standpoint of a healer, um, a lot of times people will take painkillers and things like that. It's not addressing the root, it's just masking the pain. Okay. Sometimes, we'll do different things to mask situations, and we'll self-medicate for emotional pain that we feel. We self-medicate through eating. We self-medicate through recreational drugs. We self-medicate through our devices, using them as distractions. We self-medicate, and really that's tied to just about every addiction there is. It's a form of self-medicating from some form of, in most cases, emotional pain. But whether the pain is emotional pain, whether the pain is physical pain, regardless of what type of pain it is, a lot of times we do things to mask that pain, because who likes pain? Pain doesn't by definition, pain doesn't feel good. It hurts. We don't like pain, and we frequently do what we can to avoid the experience of feeling pain. And uh, from my perspective as a healer, I'm always focusing on what's the root cause of the pain. Let's get rid of it at the root. Okay. If you think about a garden, if you think about a garden, you might be growing some fruits, some vegetables, maybe some flowers, and uh, and I'm sure it's your hope that those things that you've planted will prosper. Now, one of the things that can hinder that is weeds growing up. Weeds growing up. Now, what will happen with a weed is the weed will begin to choke life out of that which you had intended, that which you're growing to either offer beauty or nourishment in some form, right? And so, if you don't want the beauty to be annihilated or choked out, if you don't want that which is life giving and nourishing to be choked out, then the weeds need to be addressed. And I remember when I was a boy, there were times I had to pull the weeds. Sometimes weeds would grow even in the cracks between the sidewalk. Sometimes would grow, and weeds would grow. And uh, anybody who knows anything about that knows that you can chop off the top of the weed, but you haven't gotten rid of the weed. Pretty soon you're going to see that weed again, because you didn't address it at its what? At its root. And so uh, no matter what you do to the problem, if you're not addressing it at the root, you haven't gotten rid of it. That problem is going to continue to fester, it's going to continue to persist. As long as the roots of that weed are present, it's going to choke out the life of your fruits, your vegetables, your flowers, whatever it is that you've planted. And so if you want to get rid of them, you got to pull it up all the way from the root. If you've got a foul odor in your home, you can spray Febreze, you can light incense, you can diffuse essential oils, you can burn candles or whatever form of aromatherapy you want to. But listen, hey, if that trash has not been taken out, or whatever it is that's causing that odor isn't removed, all you've done is masked the odor. You haven't actually gotten rid of it. You've got to actually address it from the point of the root cause. And until whatever the issue is addressed from the root cause, it's going to continue to persist. And similarly with hate, we can put out these platitudes and such to try to you know tone down the hate, and we can fight against hate. Guess what? Listen, there is a movie that Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman were in years ago. What was the name of that movie? If you know the movie, type it in the chat. Crimson Tide. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Crimson Tide. And there was this point where they were going back and forth. There ended up being a mutiny on this submarine. One of them thought that there a part of a message had come through, but not the whole message. And there was this really difficult challenge that the two main characters, Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington's characters, were facing. One was wanting to detonate this nuclear warhead, and the other was not. And and there was, of course, a lot of drama that was around that, and how everything ended up playing out and everything. Like I said, there ended up being a mutiny on the ship and everything. But one of the characters, Denzel Washington's character, was talking about war and asked who wins in war. And he said that nobody wins in war. Nobody wins in war. If we are at war, war is what wins. And all of us have ultimately lost. And so it is with hate. You know, we can fight against hate. We can fight against crime. We can fight against all of these other things. But as this is coming up to me from scripture, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the tearing down of strongholds. They're strongholds that we as human beings experience. And regardless of what your religious background is, I think this is a truth that you can find relatable. That, there are things that we in our humanness and our logic and our thinking and our trying to do things in our own strength that we try to do to alleviate things. But there really is, as Dr. Wayne Dyer said, a spiritual solution to every problem. I believe that. I believe that that's the case. And when we look at things like hate, we've got to first understand what the root cause of it is. I think that that's helpful in understanding what the root cause of hate is. And so, what is the root cause of hate? Hmm. The root cause of hate is a misperception of truth. The root cause of hate is a misperception of truth. Let me expound on that a little bit. All right. Again, I share with you, I developed and worked with a methodology that I refer to as transcending the matrix. All right. And this matrix that I talk about, or I frequently refer to it as the matrix of third dimensional beliefs of separation and limitation. What is it that I'm talking about here? We in this physical world live in a world of three dimensions. Now, that's not the totality of dimensions that there are, but we live in a world of three dimensions in terms of our physical world. Okay, if you just had a straight line, that would be one dimension. If you drew a square, it would be two dimensions. You make it a box, and it's three dimensions, right? And so it is with our physical world. Now, in that context, we end up experience ourselves as being separate from everything else. We occupy our small little area of space that our bodies occupy, you know, and we experience everything outside of ourselves, outside of our physical selves, as being separate from us, right? We experience the chair that we're sitting in as being separate from us. We experience the window in the room that we're in as separate from us. We experience the tree as separate from us. We experience other people as separate from us, especially if they think differently, look differently, behave differently, worship differently, love differently, vote differently, are of a, you know, different, from a different part of the, uh, from a different part of the world or a different part of the city, you know, um, eat differently, all of these different things. We end up getting this idea that based on this sense of separation. And I say sense of separation because it's based on only the five physical senses that give us this sense of separation. That sense of separation is a perception that we have, but it's not actually a completely accurate perception. There's a term in the ancient Sanskrit called Maya, frequently translated as illusion. It essentially means that things are not as they seem. The reality is that it seems like we're separate from the chair that we're sitting in. It seems like we're separate from the window in the room that we're in. It seems like we're separate from the tree. It seems like we're separate from the person who looks different than us, thinks differently than us, operates differently from us, lives in a different part of town or different part of the country than us, speaks differently, uh, views life differently, operates differently in whatever way that could be, whether it's political, religious, ethnic, or anything else, right? We have this idea that because this person is separate from us, and let's make it with people, uh, because this person is separate from us, that there's maybe cause for some concern. And why is there cause for concern? There's cause for concern because the other part of that, what I'll refer to in this context as an illusion, that with the separation, there's also this sense of limitation, right? A limited amount of how much rightness there can be, of how much truth there could be, of how much love there can be, of how much love there can be, of how much power there can be, of how much peace there can be, right? And so we look and we see people who think differently, who look differently, who operate differently, who came from another country than what we came from, or whatever the case might be. And then we take these two things that are actually missing the mark, this idea that we're separate from one another, and this idea that there's these limitations. And we get this idea that if we are different, then one of us must be deficient. Who wants to be the one who's considered as being deficient? Nobody. Absolutely nobody does. Nobody wants to feel like there's not enough for them, whether it's jobs or opportunities or love or respect or whatever the case might be, right? Sense of security. Nobody wants to feel like there's a not enough for them. And so we've got these two things going on, the sense of separation, the sense of limitation. Both of these are really kind of feeding into one another, and it brings the ultimate vibe of a sense of fear. A sense of fear. Fear is some of you who come and check out these broadcasts, great acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear is false evidence appearing real. It's what things seem like, but it's not really real. If you've ever heard the term Satan, or in the Hebrew, Ha-Satan, or the Satan, it is the accuser, all right? The one who's actually presenting this false evidence to create a sense of guilt and shame and condemnation. That is literally what the Satan is. The accuser, the one uh, who aims to create this sense of divide, this sense of chaos, this sense of guilt and shame, uh, this sense of all of the things that really keep us bound, warring against ourselves and each other, right? Now, all of that is rooted in fear. And there's so much, oh my gosh, there's so much in our world that feeds into the fear. You know, there's some who maintain that there are spirits in the underworld that feed off of fear like it's crack, right? That feed off of it like it's crack. And so there's all of this stuff that's done. There's stuff that's put out in the media. There are these things that are, there's this energy that's put out there to continue to feed fear, so that those who feed on the fear can grow stronger, if you will, because there's this false belief that there is a limitation of how much power there can be. And real power, a gentleman by the name of David Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins, um, brilliant man actually, had a PhD as well as a doctor of medicine, who was a psychiatrist as well. Um, Wrote a book, I believe it may have been his first book. He's written other books, a book called Power versus Force. And he talked about the difference between differentiating power, differentiating power from force, and how we typically perceive power, the power that we have over somebody else, that's what he really described as force. What he talks about is really power, what's really authentic power is something that is internal. Okay. It's an inner strength that one can draw upon. It's not about having power over somebody else. It's about overcoming that which stands in one's own way in order to be the highest and best version of themselves that they can possibly be. Right? Now, many of us don't even seek power in terms of that perspective, that authentic power. We feel comfortable resulting to finding ways of having power over other people. Okay. And if we're able to wipe people out as violently as a function of a sense of hate, or all of these other isms that we have, then that can give a false sense of power. It's really just force. It's not really true power. It's a false sense of power. It's an evidence, it's an example of false evidence appearing real, right? And so here we are. We live in a 3D world. And really, like I said earlier, that's not the only dimensions that we're impacted or influenced by, but it's what we pay the closest attention to in this meat suit, in this, in this earth suit, in this physical body that we wear. We relate to life in so many ways from this sense of separation and limitation, from this sense of fear. And hate is merely a function of that. Now, like I said earlier, the root of hate is really a false perception. It's a false perception. Where do we get this false perception from? Where do people who hate get a false perception from? Let me, I realize that I'm a person who can be very philosophical in nature. Um, I want to make sure that I'm not talking over anybody's head, and I want to greetings and salutations to you, my brother, my literal brother, my blood brother, Damian Thomason, my my man, 50 grand. Where was I going with this? Yeah, that's where I was going. And what? Let me make it plain. I'm a black man living in the United States of America. I'm ultimately a spiritual being having a spiritual experience in the context of a physical three-dimensional world, right? Um, I ultimately am spirit that has no gender, that has no shape, that has no color. My essence is spirit, and the same as yours. However, I came to this earth in physical form as a human, right? Something that you can physically see, right? And I came into this world uh, born into an African American family. I own that. Joyously, I do. And we all came into whatever body we came into, I don't believe by any means by mistake. I celebrate the body that I came in. I celebrate the heritage and the culture that I came into. And I recognize areas where there's room for growth in the culture too, where there's error in aspects of the culture too. And perhaps you are the same with whatever your own background is. And so let me share from I have certainly within my own experience as an African American man living in the United States, experienced uh, certainly various forms of hatred manifested, you know, in a collective context and individually and personally. And I'm not going to go over a whole lot of personal stories of areas where where I experienced some harsh and unfair treatment. Um, but suffice it to say that I most certainly have. I most certainly have, and most people have experienced some harshness towards them in one way or another. Um, and that's something that we can all share in common. And some people don't necessarily have everybody else's struggle. Everybody has their own struggle. Uh, my struggle might not be your struggle might not be my struggle. Okay. If you are from a different culture, if you're from a different of a different gender, your struggle might be something totally separate from mine, and you may not be able to necessarily relate to mine. But an area that we do have in common is that we do have our own struggles, and dealing with this context of hate, you know, yes, there are people who share my experience as being African American living in the United States of America, or being a person of color in general, regardless of what the ethnic background is, where you may have also experienced hatred rooted in a racial hatred, perhaps. And sometimes when people experience forms of hatred or violence towards them, or violence towards someone that they love and care about. Sometimes that can be something that stimulates a person to feel hate, right? A person can be stimulated to feel hate based on whatever their own experience has been, because they have been hated or hate has been spewed out towards them. It's totally understandable, and I'm not condoning it. Let me make that very clear. I'm not condoning hate in any form. Um, Nor am I even justifying it. I'm just saying that I get places that it comes from. That is one of the places that it comes from. Another place that it comes from is from socialization. First, we've been. I don't believe that a baby comes into the world hating. I don't. I just don't. Although I am very, very clear that we do carry with us the memories of our ancestors before us. I am very, very clear that there are things that our ancestors weren't able to work out in their lifetimes that we actually have in our lifetimes, and we get the opportunity to work out the things that they weren't able to work out. We get the opportunity to break the patterns that they didn't get to break, right? And so, yeah, that's very real. I have seen numerous occasions, and we've had on these live broadcast situations where people had physical ailments that were tied to their things going on in their family lineage, in their DNA, operating within them and within their life experience, that was really rooted in ancestral experiences, and we did things to resolve that, and people got well as a function. But I do believe, independent of that, I do believe that people as babies come into this earth with a sense of innocence. I believe that. I don't believe that babies come into the earth hating. I believe that people learn to hate. I believe that people learn to hate, and sometimes they learn to hate from their experience. Sometimes they learn to hate because that's what they've been taught. That's because that's what they've been taught. I know that a lot of people have been taught to hate other people. I know that there are people of every ethnicity that have been taught to hate people of other ethnicities, right? Why is that? I said before, I talked about this false evidence that appears real. I talked about this sense of we're separate from one another. I talked about us ultimately the ultimate root of hate is a misperception. We're seeing things, we're not seeing things clearly. Another scripture that's coming to my mind from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We frequently think about that in terms of love is patient and love is kind, and it's not proud and does not boast, and it's not easily angered, and it doesn't envy, and all of those things. It always hopes, always trusts, always protects, always perseveres, it never fails. We think about 1 Corinthians in that context, but after that, it talks about right now we see through a glass dimly. We're not seeing things clearly. We're looking through a veil, as it were. The way that I describe this is as a matrix of illusion, and I talk about this in the training. I talk about this matrix and how it's a filter through which we see everything in our world, including ourselves and the people that we encounter. And it's really essentially a programming. It's a sense of um, of illusion that's really rooted in fear, false evidence that appears real, and we get indoctrinated. We get indoctrinated in our experience and things that we are fed. Many years ago, well, not that many years ago, it was maybe 2010, 2011, 2010, I feel like it was, maybe even 2009. I preached a sermon called The Spiritual Aphrodisiac Diet. It talked about the reticular activating system and the things that you take into the senses through your physical senses kind of program you. And then they essentially really program your subconscious mind. So the things that you're taking in through your physical senses, the things that you're listening to, the things that you're hearing, the things that you're seeing, the things that you're taking in through really all of the physical senses, really program your subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is the determiner of your life experience on this earth, what's going on in your mind subconsciously. So you may consciously want something and subconsciously not think that you're worthy of it, and then push it away when it comes. You may consciously want things to happen that are going to, to elevate your life, but you may subconsciously have a fear of how that will change your life in negative ways and may self-sabotage. You may consciously want to lose weight, but subconsciously um, really have a great preference for just eating whatever it is that you want to eat and not exercising, right? And so really the determining factor in how our lives unfold is really largely connected to what's going on with us subconsciously. There are things beneath the surface, there are things that are deeply ingrained within us. And so ultimately I maintain that, like scripture says, that we're seeing through a glass dimly. We're seeing in the dark, but we're not really seeing. Everything that we're seeing is seen through a filter that's distorting what the actual reality is. Here's the reality. I don't like what that young man did in Buffalo, New York last weekend. Here's a reality that's a little bit more difficult for me to accept. I am one with a young man that did that. If I can see the ignorance in him, if I have the wherewithal to see the violent tendency in him, the hatred in him, if I have eyes to see it in somebody else, it must on some level exist within me. It must on some level exist within me. And I may, in some level, contribute to the hate and the violence that exists in the world. Now, this is being 100% responsibility, taking 100% responsibility for our world and the things that we see in it. Can you change everything and everybody? No, you can't. But what you can do is you can get real clear about your own transformation. And listen, I have seen some phenomenal things happen. I have seen some absolutely miraculous things happen by people who decided to do something different than everybody else had previously been deciding to do. And miracles, miraculous things have taken place, right? Miraculous things. Nobody, except for people who are proud to be racist. And there are folks who fall into that category. Nobody wants to be considered to be a racist. It's not cool. It's not in fashion, right? Anybody who's considered to be one, if anybody who's called one by somebody, they're probably going to be offended by that. You know, in general, it's perceived as a bad thing to be racist, right? In general, it's perceived as a bad thing to be sexist or misogynistic, right? In general, that's not like cool right now, based on um, where we currently are in this day and age. That's not politically correct. How many of us are willing to take a really deep look inside and see how the people who boil our blood, so to speak, the people who really ruffle our feathers, to see that they're actually representing something in us that we maybe haven't been willing to fully own ourselves? Maybe your particular ism isn't racism. Maybe your particular ism isn't sexism. Maybe your particular ism isn't what you're seeing in somebody else and judging in somebody else. Maybe it's not. But who among us will be willing to take a deeper look inside? Who among us will be willing to take responsibility for the healing in this earth? Guess what? You don't heal by condemning others. Now, does that mean that this guy who shot and killed these people violently shouldn't undergo some consequences? Definitely doesn't mean that. I absolutely believe that he should experience uh, appropriate ramifications of his actions. Okay, I absolutely believe that he should, but I also know that just listen. I said earlier, there's essentially he's essentially building on a manual for other people to follow. Other people have done similarly. He's essentially added to the manual for what other people can do. Just getting rid of this guy or just uh, throwing this person in jail or that person in jail, that alone isn't going to do it. Just shaming people on a particular news network that you're on, guess what? The only people who see that is people who think like you already. That's the reality of the matter. The way that these algorithms are working right now, when you do a search for something, you're only going to see the stuff that shows up based on what you've looked at previously. And so regardless of which side of the spectrum you're on, you just get fed more of what you're already thinking. You just get fed more of what you're already thinking. And so, what is it two people who believe the same thing arguing about other people? What good is actually coming from that? You might feel temporarily satisfied because of the rhetoric that you engaged in with somebody who believes the same thing that you believe or sees things similar to you. But does that mean that deep healing has happened? Doesn't mean that deep healing has happened. In this work that I refer to as transcending the matrix, yes, we see some wonderful things. People like a Curly Conscious King and other people who've trained in this work have seen some miraculous things happen with people's health, with people's life situations and circumstances. And listen, I am very thankful that there have been thousands of people that I have been blessed to be a vessel of healing for in their lives. Whether it's eliminating tumors, repairing broken bones, getting rid of physical disease, eliminating of pain. I'm very thankful and very honored to be able to do that. I have compassion for people. I have a genuine love for people, and I want people to suffer. Okay, been able to do a lot of things to help in terms of people's uh, perception of themselves and sense of worthiness and things of that nature. But beyond the things on the individual level, and yeah, there are things that it's value in us doing on the physical level. I believe in that. I believe that there's a tremendous amount of value in offering physical healing and offering mental and emotional healing. Ultimately, I believe the greatest value is in offering this the spiritual healing. And what we're really looking to do, what I'm looking to do in terms of this work, is to really engender more authentic peace in the world. I'm on a peace mission for the global community. Dare I say, even cosmic community, you know. Um, I really believe that there is opportunity for significant transformation to take place. And yes, there are problems that exist in our world that are systemic. There are ways that we continue to feed into the problems. But listen, hey, I believe in a God who is able to transform any and every situation. And I believe that we are called to be vessels uh, working towards that. For anybody who's been through the transcending the matrix training, we know that ultimately God is the healer, that we are the vessels, then that love is the tool. That we are given the wonderful opportunity to be able to engage in transformation, not of only of ourselves, of the people in our individual world, whether they be our clients, our patients, our family members, our loved ones, people that we encounter, but even in the greater context, that we're really working to create a more harmonious and unified, or more harmonious and loving global community to the glory of God. And I believe that that's possible. And I'm working to do my part in that. And I don't believe that I can do it alone. I believe that the more of us are engaged in this kind of work, the more transformation can actually happen. I believe the more of us who are engaged in this work, the more transformation can possibly happen. The truth of the matter is that anybody who's filled with hate is filled with fear. That anybody who's filled with hate is first and foremost filled with fear. They're filled with fear. They're filled with a sense of false evidence that is appearing real. They're feeling afraid. And maybe you might think that, well, that's their problem, that's their issue. Well, guess what? It becomes your issue when their fear ends up being manifested in violence that comes to your doorstep. I believe that there's an opportunity for us to challenge the fear. What happens that this person here operates in fear, and then and this person over here says, no, F that. I'm gonna make them feel fear. Right? Can I just be real about it? We experience fear, and we engage in this, what we can refer to as a power struggle. Really, it's a force struggle in the context of what I was talking about earlier in terms of power versus force. Listen, I was having a conversation with my brother Damien recently, and we were talking about a gentleman. His name escapes me at the moment. This is a black man who started befriending people in the Ku Klux Klan, right? People who are high up in the organization. He wasn't shaming them, just trying to see where they were coming from, wanting to understand things from their perspective. He would begin to hear their experience and their thoughts. He would share his experience and his thoughts, and a mutual respect started being developed. And the people who had been operating from that fear and that hatred, they end up leaving the organization because they saw something different. You know, fear can be a tremendous motivator, folks. But I believe that love can be an incredibly powerful motivator too. And I'm speaking as one who's all about love, or as my grandfather John A. Hall would say, love. As one who's all about love, to me, love is a greater motivator for me than fear. It's more enduring, it's more lasting. And guess what else? It's backed by God. It's backed by God. And guess what, folks? God plus anybody or anything is a majority, right? And so I said earlier that those who dwell in love dwell in God. And as we're looking to do this work, this love work, sometimes the love work requires us to engage with people who think and feel very differently than us. Sometimes it requires us to challenge our own illusions. Sometimes it requires us to challenge our own hangups. Sometimes it challenges us to get out of our own comfort box, out of our own comfort zone, and engage with people from another perspective, and really try to hear where it is that they're coming from. So often we listen, even in our personal lives, we listen only to the degree, really not even listening. A lot of times we're just waiting for our turn to talk, to share what our perspective is. But sometimes, everybody has a need on some level to be heard and seen for who they are, right? And for where it is that they're coming from. And a lot of times when people don't feel heard and they don't feel seen, they do other things to get attention so that they can feel seen and heard. Now, with some people, it's insatiable, yes. But all of us have that basic need. All of us have that basic need. And maybe a challenge for you is to be able to hear somebody else's perspective who may come from a totally different perspective than you've come from. And you may think that their perspective is totally invalid. And maybe you're even right. But maybe there's a reason that they have that perspective. And maybe if you listen carefully enough, maybe if you listen carefully enough, you might be able to hear how you can speak to them in a way that actually reaches them where they are. As a teacher, as a healer, I believe that everybody is healable. I believe that everybody is teachable. Some people aren't as easily teachable as others. Not everybody fits the cookie cutter design. For some people, the stuff that works with just about everybody else doesn't work for them. It just doesn't. And I believe that my job as a minister, as a healer, as a teacher, part of my own internal work is to find what is it that I need to shift in me? What is it that needs to be shifted in me? How is it that this person needs to be reached? And how is it that I can grow in order to bring it to them in a way that actually reaches them? Okay. Now, not everybody is willing to take that on. I am, though. If you're willing to take that on, I encourage you to do so. And hey, I'd love for you to journey with me in this work. As we're seeking to uh, not only in our own individual lives, reach that state of sustainable satisfaction, that supreme state of sustainable satisfaction, but also in terms of the larger context of creating more harmonious and unified, loving global community to the glory of God, right? And is it something that we can do alone? I believe that with God, all things are possible, and I believe that as we work together, we can make some really wonderful, phenomenal things happen. I encourage you to do a little soul searching and genuinely ask God to help you see you, to genuinely ask God to empower you in a way like never before, to help you grow and to be the grandest version of yourself, the best version of yourself. I challenge you to sincerely, genuinely, and sincerely ask God and do the work that's necessary to see things from a different perspective than whatever your limited perspective has been up to this point. Because it certainly has been limited up to this point. Even mine has, and I'm still working at it too. If you want to reach out to us, feel free to do so on Instagram at Royce Fletcher Thomason or at Transcending the Matrix on Instagram or on Facebook at Royce Fletcher Thomason. I encourage you to uh, like the videos that we're putting out there on YouTube or on Facebook, whatever it is that you're watching. And even if you're watching on Facebook, please subscribe on YouTube. Because the more people are seeing this, the more people it ends up being able to reach. That's just how the the algorithms work. And if you feel like this is something that's worthwhile for people to hear, worthwhile for people to be able to get some exposure to, please share it, or even copy the link in YouTube on your Facebook, or and share in different Facebook groups that you might be part of. I believe that it is imperative that we are elevating the consciousness of humanity on planet Earth. There are many opportunities for darkness for us to get swallowed up in darkness. But I believe that by bringing in the light, we can challenge the dark. The light doesn't fight against the dark, by the way. In the presence of the light, the dark disappears. That's just the case, right? That's just the case. You find any totally dark room, you turn on the light, and the light isn't fighting with the dark. The dark just disappears in the presence of the light because darkness in itself isn't even a thing. It's just the absence of what is. Darkness is just the absence of the light. Sickness, illness, dis-ease are just the absence of health and well-being, right? Okay. And so, anyway, that pretty much wraps us up for today. If you feel so inclined to sow into what we're doing, we certainly welcome that. You can do Cash App at $ Royce F. Thomason. Ketrin Henley, greetings to you, my cousin. I'm sending a bunch of love your way, a bunch of peace and love, in fact. It's always wonderful to have you in the space. And I pray the richest blessings of God upon you and your life. I affirm that God is perfecting the things that are concerning you. And I know that that there's some good things that are on the horizon for you and in your life. And I celebrate that. To all of you, let me actually just say a prayer for all of us today. In the beauty of this moment that has never come before and will never come again, we take this time in this time and space called now to honor, recognize, and celebrate that no matter how horrific problems may be, no matter how challenging circumstances might be in our lives or in the world, we can take comfort in knowing that for every problem, there is a solution. For every dark night, there's a sunrise. For every challenge, for every obstacle, for every temptation, there's a way out. There's a way to overcome it. And we give great thanks that in the infinite wisdom of God, in the infinite love of God, redemption, transformation, renewal is possible, and we celebrate that. We celebrate that. We celebrate the version of reality where love is abounding, where love is reigning in the hearts of all beings everywhere. We celebrate the version of reality that exists within the mind of God and can exist within the experience of we humans, where peace is reigning supreme, where goodness is unfolding, where man's inhumanity towards man has been transmuted into love and grace extended towards one another, and where harmony, unity, love, grace, and peace are the reality of our day. I invite us all to step into that possibility, to step into that point in the future where that currently exists, and to bring it forth into this time and space called now. And God, I thank you for this as a possibility. Thank you that at the end of the day, that you never fail. And since you are love, that true unconditional love, that true unconditional love never fails. But God, help us to be able to operate on that level of love as it relates to ourselves and it relates to our fellow members of creation. Give us the wisdom and the insight to see beyond our self-imposed prisons of illusion, to see beyond the areas where we've been programmed and socialized, and where that's been more deeply ingrained through our life experiences. Give us the mental acuity and spiritual maturity to be able to see beyond the illusions and to be able to handle what it is that we see and to be able to gracefully flow in the new information that we receive, the new truth that is presented to us, and may our hearts and souls align with that. Thank you, God, for all of these gifts of your divine love. Ashe, Aho, Amen. It is done. It is done. It is done. I send peace and love your way. Thanks again, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you next time.